Hello,
Hello.
welcome back.
Welcome back to Hear Us Out.
hmm
And again, as usual, I want to say thank you to all of those who have subscribed to our channel. Thank you for listening, for your comments, questions, and concerns. And thank you for hearing us out, especially at this time.
Yeah, especially at this time,
Right,
all the stuff that's going on,
correct.
and yeah, and I'm saying once again, like we said, we are a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is affecting us as much as it's affecting you. We're frustrated and angry and all that
Mm-hmm.
good stuff.
Right,
But this is how we've decided to channel
right,
those feelings, those
right,
emotions into something like this.
right.
So
We're just trying to take a different a different route, a different perspective because we have looked at what was presented to us before,
mm,
and we looked at its successes and its failures, and now this what is at our feet now, it calls for us to do something else, and so that's what we are attempting to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. So let's
Yeah.
not uh, dwell
Believe.
too long
Yeah.
on it because
Hmm.
that'll be the entire episode.
Right. Right.
So let's dive right back into our conversation
Hmm.
about anarchy.
Right.
And to review our last episode where we talked about anarchy, we said really was establishing exactly how anarchy was meant to remedy a
Hmm.
particular situation,
Right.
and we said that anarchy is not chaos or
Right.
madness. Anarchy is still
A philosophy,
a,
an
a
idea. Hmm.
philosophy and an
Hmm.
idea, and more importantly, it's a system.
Correct.
It's a system, and it's meant to close the gap
Correct. Hmm.
between the people and their government.
Right.
And that it's because of that gap, that space,
Hmm.
that separation
Right.
that a lot of the problems are able to fester
Right.
inside of our
Anarchy
society.
is not what, you know, uh, Attorney General Barr
Well,
is
yeah,
stressing. So I just wanted to make that
yeah.
point clear.
No, then I'm surprised. He's wrong about something. Who would have
Right.
thought?
Duh. Right.
But yeah, but like you said, anarchy is not wanton chaos.
Hmm.
It is it is a structure, but it is a structure that is a bit more nebulous, a bit
Hmm.
more flexible, that is able to respond to the people where they are. And I would say, that it's a lot smaller.
Hmm.
It's a lot more gradual and stuff like that.
Right.
And we last time we referenced Brothers Karamazov, right?
Right.
In the chapter where they were talking about the separation between
The
church and
state.
state.
Right. But we said
Yeah,
that church is
that,
the
that
people.
church. Yeah,
Right. Hmm.
you watch the episode if you want to.
Right.
Like, but that separation,
Hmm.
you know, becomes integral to the maintenance of society as it is,
Right.
right? And the only way that one party, that the church, that the people
Hmm.
can fulfill their goal is to eliminate the separation. And there's a lot of ways that you can go about doing that,
Hmm.
you know, but the one way that allows for the sovereignty of the individual,
Hmm.
that makes that paramount, is anarchy.
Hmm.
That allows for people and communities to grow and
Hmm.
to shift and to change and to allow for these things. So, and if our first episode was how,
Hmm. That impetus. Right.
but
Hmm.
how are these things? How is this meant to be
Hmm.
implemented? How is it? Where is it supposed to be coming from?
Right.
Right.
Hmm.
And this episode is about what in
Hmm.
particular.
Right.
What in particular is the dynamic
Hmm.
that we're trying to set up here? When we say things like, how is anarchy more flexible
Mm-hmm.
than what we're seeing right now? How is it more durable,
Mm-hmm.
able to better respond to people?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what we're going to be getting into here today.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we said before, anarchy, at least in my view, is democracy,
Mm-hmm.
a true, real
Mm-hmm.
democracy. And in the last episode, we never really defined what a democracy was.
Right.
You know, we that really wasn't what the conversation
So
was
was about.
about.
Correct.
But on this episode, we're going to be doing this, and we have once again a big old dictionary,
Right.
and there is once again many definitions
Mm-hmm.
for democracy. But there's one in particular that I want to look at. You know, and that is the fifth definition
Mm-hmm.
here that says the principles of social equality and respect for the individual within a community.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is what democracy is supposed to be. That
Mm-hmm.
is to be, if democracy is the form, then anarchy is the function,
Correct.
right?
Right.
That, society as it is right now,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't allow for people to be people.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Society as it is right now is it holds people hostage to their worries and to their fears. It's the
Mm-hmm.
only way that it knows how to make people function.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm sure if you ask the majority of the people in this country, are they happy? The answer will be no.
Correct. Yes.
And
The answer would be no.
all of them will give, a laundry list
Mm-hmm.
of the things that are keeping them up at night.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you agree with those things or not, that's the one common denominator, is
Mm-hmm.
that it keeps us, the country keeps us worried,
Mm-hmm.
keeps us afraid, keeps us confused and frazzled. It keeps threatening our lives,
Mm-hmm.
our livelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
Moment after moment after moment, it gives you just enough. It gives you, just enough to make it by. It gives
Mm-hmm.
you, just enough maybe, to indulge yourself a
Mm-hmm.
bit. You get little pockets of happiness. You got to find it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But society, it strips it away from you
Mm-hmm.
because at you know, any moment because you have to worry about your lights.
Mm-hmm.
You have to worry about, your water, your mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Food.
food,
Right.
healthcare, education, all
Mm-hmm.
these things. You have to worry about having to provide all these things for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
In a society, in a first world country, what that then says that you need these things
Mm-hmm.
to be a functioning citizen.
Right.
And I've said before that I don't understand how in a society that says that these are the things that you need, how it's
Mm-hmm.
possible for you to not
Have
have them.
them. Right.
You know, but it's possible because it's not meant to work that
Mm-hmm.
way. It's not meant to give peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
to give relief.
Right.
Not in an internal sense.
Mm-hmm.
It only ever works by scapegoating, by saying that there's an enemy out there,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't do your part, we will fail to defeat our enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So
the
you have
United
to.
States is not a democracy, right?
In what way?
Well, it's not. It's not of the people. Well, maybe a very select few, extremely few, and that few, is able to manipulate the rest, and from the inception of what we call the United States, it has not been a democracy. And I remember mentioning, that
Well, if it's not a democracy, then what is
a mess.
it?
An oligarchy is I think much
And I
more.
think what we came to is that
Mhm.
America has never really been a democracy,
That's right.
right? I think we touched
It
on that.
touts itself as one.
Well, it's a
Yes.
form of
Right.
democracy because if I were to look at the very first definition of
Yeah.
democracy in this dictionary, it's a government by the people exercised either directly or through elected representatives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't live in a direct
Mm-hmm.
democracy. We live in a representative
Mm-hmm.
democracy.
And, well,
And like I
okay.
said, you know,
And even that, I think
that
it's
implies an implicit trust between the people and those that are meant to represent them.
yeah, whatever.
And like I don't
Donald
think
Trump
that.
was not elected by the majority of the people,
Mhm.
yet he represents the entire, the country as the president of the United States. So even in that frame, there is a that's not what it is.
As you said,
So
it's a representative democracy. It's
yeah,
a
whatever.
it's a
Yeah, it
form
is.
of
Yeah,
democracy.
right. I get what you're saying.
It's 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 not a
Democracy,
democracy.
correct. And I
you know,
think, and I think, I'm trying to you know, drive that home is that we think of the United States as a democracy, the beacon of hope and all that other great stuff that it likes to tout itself as. But this country is not a democracy, you know. And like I said, it's set up where almost half of the people will always be disgruntled, right? If it's quote unquote majority rule, right? So that's like 51% or whatever the case may be, right? So that means that you're going to have 49% of the people, right, who who are not getting, what they need from their own government, and that's how it's set up all the time. So you're going to always have this constant fighting. Even at times when you think it's peaceful, and I'm using peaceful in quotations, right? You're going to always have this constant strife because it's not moving along with all of its people. It's only moving with a particular set of them at all times.
yeah, and I would argue that it's not even moving with the majority.
Yes, I like I mentioned earlier that it's a
Mhm.
particular
That's what I'm saying.
few.
It's an oligarchy, like what we
Yes,
say, a representative oligarchy.
correct.
Where your representatives go off to be a part of and try their best to be a
Hmm.
part of be a part of a very select group of people who
Hmm.
actually benefit
Right,
from the system.
right. So I
You
just
know,
wanted to
and the
put that
majority
up.
of us, and the majority of us, we said we have to live in that constant cycle of worry and fear and always, riding the edge of that lightning bolt,
Hmm.
never knowing when you're going to, hit home, when it's
Right,
all going to be over,
right,
when that thing is going to come and now you don't have a job,
right.
or you can't provide the way that you did, or,
Hmm.
you want to do something else, but you can't. So you're
Hmm.
stuck and all these things,
Hmm.
you know, society does not allow for that as it is now,
Yeah, as it's currently
you
constructed.
know.
Correct.
So if we want to try to rectify, if we want to try to create a true democracy
Hmm.
that that prioritizes the sovereignty of the individual, then like we said, we have to create something a bit small, a bit more gradual, community by community,
Hmm.
neighborhood by neighborhood,
Hmm.
that is meant to work for the people where they are,
Right.
right? So you, like I said, if you ask, well, what does that mean? What does that
Hmm.
mean?
Right.
Right? Well, this is what it means. Well, governments, large centralized governments, often fail the people. Why do they fail? And I would say it's because they have a hard time meeting the people's demands, because their very function is to create these large sweeping generalizations
Right.
that always it's always going to fail someone,
Hmm.
right? And it enforces these laws, and it forces people to go about that particular route.
Hmm.
And there's always going to be a point where a law is going to become obsolete,
Hmm.
where a law is going to do more hindrance than good,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
But laws aren't meant to change.
Mm-hmm.
Laws are meant to be, inexorable, immortal axioms of our society that guide us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and at every instance when you create these large generalizations, you are trying to, you know, you're taking a snapshot of what your country is in
Mm-hmm.
that particular time, and then you're trying to make sure that your country remains that thing.
Right. But your country can't.
It can't. People can't.
Right.
It's impossible.
Right.
Things are going to change.
Right.
Things are going to move. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be something else, you know. But society isn't geared toward moving with its people
Mm-hmm.
or trying to provide the space for its people to move,
Right.
in themselves. It's about trying to constrain. Trying to keep you locked in a particular cycle,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so the very the main power that a government is able to employ, by creating and enforcing laws, that completely undercuts everything that it's trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know you may be asking, well, so you're saying that we need to live in a lawless society, that we need to live in a society that has no rules?
Mm-hmm.
I would say
No.
no, and that like we said, anarchy isn't without a structure.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't
You
without.
have rules, but you don't have rulers. You don't have
Yeah,
that hierarchy in regards to rules. And with anarchy, you're able to, it meets the needs of the people, of all of its people. And so a law, that's constructed in 1831, about, levies and contract and military, whatever the case may be. And then there's a storm, I don't know, 100 plus years later, you know, that defies that. And then you want to pull up this antiquated law from the 19th century in order to defend yourself, you know, against whatever the issue may be today. That's not answering the needs of his people. Your people were harmed
but
today.
but like we said, that's the point of society, is
Right.
that a government is going to have to choose between
Yes.
its people
People.
and itself, and
Right.
it
It
always,
chooses itself.
always is going to choose itself.
Right.
You know,
At the people's expense.
it's always
Yes.
at the people's
Right.
expense.
And then you have folk who are like, well, that is the law. That's the law. And I'm like,
And it is the law.
it is. But it's not meeting the needs of its people. So that law, well,
That's
here it
not
is.
what
We're
it's there
talking
for.
in
That's
circles
what I'm
now.
saying.
Yes.
So forget my train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
The main point here is that the governments from the very beginning are going to come across a road where they're going to fail the
Mm-hmm.
people, right? And that it's kind of ensured by the very nature in which societies, governments govern,
Correct. How
you
they're
know?
structured. Correct. Yes.
So, how do we rectify it? Like I
Mm-hmm.
say, is it to live without laws? Is it to live, without any rules?
Right. Are you saying that, that we're not supposed to have a government?
No,
I know that. I'm
I'm
just, it's right.
saying that there needs to be a clear distinction
Mm-hmm.
between there needs to be a clear distinction between trying to constrain a people with a
Mm-hmm.
law
Mm-hmm.
and trying to ensure a freedom
Right.
with something
Else.
else. And with that something else, it's a distinction in our minds, say between rules and laws,
Right.
right? There, like for us, we say rules, and that's something different.
Right. They're
And
laws. Right.
we want to help to explain that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we get this particular perspective, or we use that particular terminology
Mm-hmm.
because there is a very very particular chapter
Right.
from a book in the Dune series from
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
It's the sixth and final book in the series,
Mm-hmm.
called Chapterhouse Dune, and there's a chapter in that book, that really, really, really
Right,
hones in
right.
on this point and really helps to draw that distinction
Distinction.
and really helps to, really helps to explain what we
Right.
mean by democracy
Democracy.
and how society is meant to constrain and keep people in that loop and is never meant to change and
Hmm.
stuff like that.
It is definitely my favorite. I talk about this chapter.
Yeah,
It's
so
my favorite,
and
definitely.
like I say, it's in the sixth book.
Hmm.
If you want to read, if you want to read Dune, I suggest you start with the beginning because
Right.
the sixth book is
Yes.
you
Yes.
know. So but yeah, to give a little background here.
Hmm.
You have a character named Lucilla, who is a Bene
That's
Gesserit,
right. Hmm.
who has been captured by the leader of the Bene Gesserit's enemies,
Right.
called the Honored
My trace.
Matres,
Hmm.
who have unleashed a campaign of genocide
Right.
against the Bene
Been against it. Right.
Gesserit,
Right.
and she's been captured by this woman, and now she has to. She's being what's the word? She's being
Yes.
um, interrogated by the great Honored Matre,
Trade. Hmm.
and the Honored Matre is very interested in how
The
Bene
Bene Gesserit.
Gesserit
Yeah.
govern
Hmm.
themselves, and so they have this whole chapter is about that conversation
Right.
about Lucilla, one, trying to gain an upper
Hand.
hand
Right against the
over
Anamatre. Right.
the Honored Matre,
Hmm.
who can kill her at any moment,
Hmm.
and two, you know, trying to explain to this woman
Right.
how a people are able to govern themselves
Themselves.
and
Right.
how a true democracy
Right. How,
actually
yes, how
works.
they able to govern themselves, even how they able to self correct
Yeah,
when things go
govern
awry.
themselves.
Yes. Hmm.
So yeah, I'm going to begin here
Hmm.
with the quote.
Yes.
Every chapter begins with a quote,
Right.
and all states are abstractions. All right. Lucilla cautioned herself not to assume too familiar a feeling about this acid green room and the recurring presence of great Anand Matre. This was Junction, stronghold of the ones who sought extermination of the Bene Gesserit. This was the enemy. Day 17. The infallible mental clock that had been set ticking during the spice agony told her she had adapted to the planet's circadian rhythms. Awake at dawn, no telling when she would be fed. Anand Matre confined her to one meal a day. And always the futar in his cage, a reminder. Both of you in cages. This is how we treat dangerous animals. We may let them out occasionally to stretch their legs and give us pleasure, but back to the cage afterwards. And now to further explain,
Hmm.
futars are kind of these human
Yeah,
animal
these hybrid,
hybrids
yeah,
that the Anand Matres have created
yeah.
or were created.
Hmm.
We don't necessarily know where they come from. We know that they have now been domesticated
Domesticated, right?
by by the Anand Matres,
Matres,
and they
right,
are used as pets.
right,
So Anand Matres have literally turned men
right. It's a
into their
pet fest,
pets.
right?
You know, minimal amounts of melange into food, not being parsimonious, not their wealth. A small show of what could be yours if you could only be reasonable. When will she come today? Great Anamatre arrivals had no set time. Random appearances to confuse the captive, probably. There would be other demands on the commander's time. Fit the dangerous pet into the regular schedule wherever you could. I may be dangerous, Spider Lady, but I am not your pet. Lucilla felt the presence of scanning devices, things that did more than provide stimulus for eyes. These looked into flesh, probing for concealed weapons, for the functioning of organs. Does she have strange implants? What about additional organs surgically added to her body? None of these, Madam Spider. We rely on things that come with birth. Lucilla knew her greatest immediate danger, that she would feel inadequate in such a setting. Her captors had her at a terrible disadvantage, but they had not destroyed her Bene Gesserit capabilities. She could will herself to die before the shear in her body was depleted to the point of betrayal. She still had her mind, and the horde from Lampadas. The futar panel opened and it came sliding out into its cage, so Spider Queen was on her way, displaying threat ahead of her as usual, earlier today, earlier than ever. Good morning, Futar, Lucilla spoke with a merry lilt. The Futar looked at her, but did not speak. You must hate it in that cage, Lucilla said. Not like cage. She had already determined that these creatures possessed a degree of language facility, but the extent of it still eluded her. I suppose she keeps you hungry too. Would you like to eat me? Eat. Definition of interest. I wish I were your handler. You handler? Would you obey me if I were? Spider Queen's heavy chair lifted from its concealment under the floor. No sign of her yet, but it had to be assumed she had listened to these conversations. The Futa stared at Lucilla with peculiar intensity. Do handlers keep you caged and hungry? Handler. Clear inflection of a question. I want you to kill Great Anamatre. That would be no surprise to them. Kill Dama and eat her. Dama poison. Dejected. Oh, isn't that an interesting bit of information? She's not poisoned. Her meat is the same as mine. The Futa approached her cage, his cage, to the cage's limits. Her cage. Lucilla's cage. People. I got turned around right there. The Futa approached her cage, her to the cage's limits. The left hand peeled down its lower lip. Angry redness of a scar there, appearance of a burn. See poison, it said, dropping its hand. I wonder how she did that. No smell of poison about her. Human flesh plus adrenaline-based drugs produce orange eyes in response to anger. And those other responses Marbella revealed. A sense of absolute superiority. How far did Futar comprehensions go? Was it a bitter poison to Futar? Grimace and spat. Action faster and more powerful than words. Do you hate Dama? Bared canines. Do you fear her? Smile. Then why don't you kill her? You not handle her. It requires a kill command from a handler. Great Anamatre entered and sank into her chair. Lucilla pitched her voice into the merry lilt. Good morning, Dama. I did not give you permission to call me that. Low and with beginning flecks of orange in the eyes. Futar and I have been having a conversation. I know, more orange in the eyes, and if you spoiled him for me. But Dama, don't call me that. Out of her chair, eyes blazing orange. Do sit down, Lucilla said. This is no way to conduct an interrogation. Sarcasm, a dangerous weapon. You said yesterday you wanted to continue our discussion of politics. How do you know what time it is? Sinking back in her chair, but eyes still flaming. All Bene Gesserit have this ability. We can feel the rhythms of any planet after a short time on it. A strange talent. Anyone could do it. A matter of being sensitized. Could I learn this? Orange fading. I said anyone. You're still human, aren't you? A question not yet fully answered. Why do you say you witches have no government? Once to change the subject, our abilities worry her. That's not what I said. We have no conventional government. Not even a social code. There's no such thing as a social code to meet all necessities. A crime in one society can be a moral requirement in another society. People always have government. Orange completely faded. Why does this interest us so much? People have politics. I told you that yesterday. Politics. The art of appearing candid and completely open while concealing as much as possible. So you witches conceal. I did not say that. When we say politics, that's a warning to our sisters. I don't believe you. Humans always create some form of accord. A good of word as any, it angers her. When Lucilla made no further response, Great Anamatra leaned forward. You're concealing. Isn't it my right to hide from you things that might help you defeat us? There's a juicy morsel of bait. I thought so, leaning back with a look of satisfaction. However, why not reveal it? You think the niches of authority are always there for the filling, and you don't see what that says about my sisterhood. Oh, please tell me. Heavy-handed with her sarcasm. You believe all of this conforms to instincts going back to tribal days and beyond, chiefs and elders, mystery mother and council, and before that the strong man or woman who saw to it that everyone was fed, that all were guarded by fire at the cave's mouth. It makes sense. Does it really? Oh, I agree. Evolution of the forms is quite clearly laid out. Evolution, which one thing piled on another. Evolution. See how she snaps at key words? It's a force that can be brought under control by turning it upon itself. Control. Look at the interest you've aroused. She loves the word. So you make laws just like anyone else. Regulations, perhaps, but isn't everything temporary? Intensely interested. Of course. But your society is administered by bureaucrats who know they cannot apply the slightest imagination to what they do. That's important. Really puzzled. Look at her scowl. Only to you, Anarchy. Great Anarchy. Isn't she touching? All right, so I'm gonna just explain a little bit of what's going on
Oh
here.
yeah.
You know, the entire conversation is sort of a battle of
Right.
Lucilla trying to get the upper hand, trying to find a way
Right.
to free herself.
Right.
Every word chosen very carefully, every gesture, chosen very carefully. And the Anand knows this, the great Anand knows this, but she is nowhere near as adept
Mm-hmm.
at it
As
as
Lucille is.
Lucilla,
Right.
mainly because, as we're going to see later on, because of the society in which she inhabits, in which
Mm-hmm.
she rules, which, as she said earlier, does not take any imagination,
Mm-hmm.
does not take any self reflection or
Mm-hmm.
perspective. You know, the Bene Gesserit, they govern themselves. They have a government,
Right.
but like she said, not a conventional one.
Right.
It's regulations, not laws.
Mm-hmm.
It's and politics, which is the development of the social accord. Which is trying to like she said, trying to look open and honest without being
Being open
open
and
and
honest.
honest.
Right.
You know, those things that help to give rise to the social hierarchies,
Mm-hmm.
they warn themselves not to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
They create a society that is meant to resist these types of hierarchies,
Right.
these types of systems. But the great Anamatra is confused, and she can't really wrap her head around how how that
Right.
works. And for her, the determining factor is that if you're still able to control your people and you're still able to control evolution, which is something that she is very interested in, the control of anything.
Right.
And if you're still having that type of control, then isn't it just the same as everything else?
Right.
Right? And much like Lucilla said, that to you, these things have a legacy,
Mm-hmm.
an evolution,
Right.
right? To you, you think that these things have changed
Change. Right.
over time.
Right. But it
And like she
hasn't.
said,
Mm-hmm.
it's an evolution of form.
Mm-hmm.
The things may look different,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always the same.
Right.
And what you're dealing with, what you're doing, falls to the same trappings as everything else.
Mm-hmm.
The Bene Gesserit, on the other hand, do something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And the great Anamatra is trying her best to reinforce her authority, her power in this situation, but she's floundering.
Big time.
And Lucilla is once again using that against her.
Right.
So let's skip ahead a little bit. All right. Great Anamatra turned her orange gaze toward Lucilla. What about bureaucrats? They have no room to maneuver because that's the way their superiors grow fat. If you don't see the difference between regulation and law, both have the force of law. I see no difference. She doesn't know what she reveals.
Mm-hmm.
Laws convey the myth of enforced change. A bright new future will come because of this
Mm-hmm.
law or that one.
Mm-hmm.
Laws enforce the future. Regulations are believed to enforce the past. Believed? She doesn't like that word either. In each instance, action is illusory, like appointing a committee to study a problem. The more people on the committee, the more preconceptions applied to the problem. Careful. She's really thinking about this, applying it to herself. Priscilla pitched her voice in its most reasonable tones. You live by a past magnified and tried to understand some unrecognized future.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm, a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain that one?
uh. Well, say it again.
You live by a past magnified and tried to understand some unrecognized future.
Well, that can apply to the so many instances.
Mm-hmm. But how's
You
it
know,
being used here?
you're thinking that your your past is going to, you know, reflect or going to move you in your future, but it's not. If anything, it's going to, you keep looking back. If you keep looking back, then you don't know how to necessarily move forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's the thing that's actually, it's holding you from the future that you think, that you claim, that you even
But
want.
that's the thing, is
Right.
that you're trying to you're trying to you're trying to control
Right.
instead of live with. Much like
Right.
she said early on about how laws are meant to enforce a change, to
Mm-hmm.
enforce a future,
Right.
to enforce a particular status quo. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, it takes a snapshot of what the world is, what your
Right.
society is, and
Mm-hmm.
tries to maintain that
Mm-hmm.
as stringently as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you create these laws, and it constrains.
Mm-hmm.
You end up enshrining your past.
Right.
You know, your laws in trying to enforce the future end up enforcing your
Your past.
past,
Right.
creating a stagnation to where
Mm-hmm.
that is all that it ever can be,
Right.
right? Whereas by with a regulation,
Mm-hmm.
right, and the distinction that she's making, when you enforce your past, right,
Mm-hmm.
you end up enshrining your
Your
future.
future. Right.
You end up allowing people to grow a particular sense of perspective about what has been
Right.
and what they have done
Mm-hmm.
that allows them to prepare themselves for what may
May
come.
become. Right.
It's about prioritizing, like she said. Let me see. Let me get back to the quote here. You live by a past magnified and try to understand some unrecognized future.
Mm-hmm.
The future is always going to be unrecognized.
Recognizable.
It's always going to be something else. It's what's to come.
Mm-hmm.
But you think that you can control
Control
that,
what? Right.
by creating these laws that enforce a particular way of being.
Mm-hmm.
But all you ever end up doing is magnifying the preconceptions of
Right.
what things are
Right.
and leaves you floundering and unprepared for what is to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what bureaucracies, and especially any system that is not a democracy. That's what ends up happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I said, that's all it can do.
Right.
It's not meant to prepare its people, and it just quite simply it can't.
Mm-hmm.
It is incapable of being able to do that because you're not preparing the people. You're not actually you know recontextualizing
Mm-hmm.
your past. You're not learning from your mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You're just creating a law to enforce a particular axiom of your present.
Mm-hmm.
To dictate the future.
Right.
But everything ends up falling in on itself,
Mm-hmm.
and we're seeing that now. Like you said, all you end up doing is living in small, contained little circles, little
Mm-hmm.
pockets of history. What's happening right now is nothing new.
Right.
We've seen it a million times before,
Mm-hmm.
and it's happening right
Right
now,
now.
but you're caught up in the momentum of it,
Mm-hmm.
that you're thinking you're living in your time,
Right.
not seeing
Mm-hmm.
how everything is feeding into this repetition, this cycle, this vicious cycle,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And like we said, you want to create more laws. You
Right.
want you want a new amendment to be passed, a new
Right.
thing, and you think it's going to change things, but they don't.
Right. And
They
we should
don't.
know that better than us.
They don't.
Right.
They're going to leave you
It's
unprepared.
prepared
They're
for
going to
right.
leave you wanting.
Right.
You're going to need something a bit more flexible, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to require a lot more work, much like you know recontextualizing your past,
Mm-hmm.
learning from it,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that your past and that recontextualization and your perception of it
Mm-hmm.
is going to change as well.
Correct.
So you need to be prepared
Right.
for your past to change,
Right.
for the things that were good
Mm-hmm.
to become bad,
Bad.
for the things that were bad to become good
Right.
again,
And
for
you have
all
to
of
be
these
able to
things.
move in that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, and that's
Mm-hmm.
and that's where many systems fail.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we mean by trying to create something else.
Mm-hmm.
That anarchy is a true democracy. That
Right.
anarchy engenders true democracy because it puts the onus on the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every person is going to have to come to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever that point may be, is different from person to person, but it all remains that you're going to have to come to a point, to a crossroads,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where either you're running from something or you're
You're
running
going
towards
right.
something.
Mm-hmm.
You're running from the darkness or you're running towards the light.
Right.
What is it that you're doing? For
Mm-hmm.
so long, we've been running we've been running away
Mm-hmm.
from that darkness, refusing to contextualize our past, using everything that we are to constrain our past down to one thing.
Right.
And what we're seeing right now is kind of the byproduct of that.
Right.
You know, Thomas Jefferson for so long has been a hero
Right.
to people, but now when he's the villain, now everyone's left because
right.
that's the thing is that
You always try to bring up the bad stuff.
He's not a hero. He's not a villain.
Right.
He's not any of these things.
That's right.
You know, anytime you try to constrain your past down to that, instead of actually trying to approach the people as they are, you know, take the good with the bad or the bad with the good, or being able to understand that, you know, he did good things, he did bad things, right? But you want to define a person by their convenience to you, by their role to you now. You're not understanding your past.
Right.
You're constraining it once again. Right? And you think you're living for the future when all you're doing is creating more of the past. Right?
What you said is the problem.
You know, what we say,
right? What is the problem, right?
It's the problem. Right. What was,
right?
You know, is the genesis of the systemic racism. Like it's always been here. It's always been here. It's always been here.
Right.
You know, but we try to correct it. We try to correct it in a way that only creates more problems.
Right.
that always creates and reinforces more social hierarchies, more social codes.
Right.
Instead of trying to recontextualize and understand our history from a perspective that allows it to live and allows it to change with us.
Right. And I always go back to the quote, you know, well, I paraphrase Malafi Asante when he talks about Egypt, right? In ancient Egypt, that it's not this relic of the past. You know, it's not this thing that's dead. It's not a graveyard, you know, and we need to stop looking at it as that's, you know, that's what it used to be, you know, and even in defining that, we have created a people so mythological as if, you know, they didn't get up in the morning and have bad days, you know, or that, you know, they didn't have problems. We're thinking because they did this, they did that, they were so great. And so in defining, we have defined them to the point to where they're not even people, you know. And so in attempting to recontextualize, we understand that they were a people, that they had, you know, their ups and downs and falls and all of those different things that, you know, I don't know, that we don't think that they did have. And when we are, you know, writing our histories and defining our heroes today, we make them out to be something that's so we're making them out not to be people, you know. And that's for so long, maybe because, you know, we've always been taught, at least under this, that, you know, that they weren't people.
You're not taught to see your history as a living
thing, right?
You're not taught to see it as something that is still present,
right?
That you're still living in,
right?
You know, it's not taught. You create these clear distinctions. You know, like I say, you're trying to constrain your view.
Right.
You're trying to enforce a future.
Right.
But you're just magnifying the past.
Correct.
Instead of just seeing it for as it was. You know, trying to gain some perspective from that way. You know, and everything falls in on itself. It always feels like that's all it can do because you're not running towards the light. You're not actually creating something for you where you are now. Right. You know, and you can't do that. The system is literally incapable. It needs to be something else. Right. Right? So let's continue. Right? We don't believe in prescience. And she does, at least. That is why she keeps us alive. Damocles. There's always something unbalanced about confining yourself to a tight circle of laws. Like we said, be careful. She didn't brittle at you calling her Damo. Great Aunt Matre's chair creaked as she shifted in it. But laws are necessary. Necessary? That's dangerous. How so? Softly. She feels threatened. Necessary rules and laws keep you from adapting. Inevitably, everything comes crashing down. It's like bankers thinking they buy the future. Power in my time. To hell with my descendants. What are descendants doing for me? Don't say it. Look at her. She's reacting out of the common insanity. Give her another small taste. Anamatres originated as terrorists, bureaucrats first, and terror as their chosen weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When it's in your hands, use it. But we were rebels. Terrorists, that's too chaotic. She likes that word, chaos. It defines everything on the outside. She doesn't even ask how you know her origins. She accepts our mysterious abilities. Isn't it odd, Dama? The reaction continued. How rebels all too soon fall into old patterns if they are victorious. It's not so much a pitfall in the path of our governments as it is a delusion waiting for anyone who gains power. How many times have we said that? How many
Right.
times have we talked about, like Napoleon came out of a liberal far left movement?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the last episode, the anarchists in Italy gave rise. No,
Yes, you said
it was
gave rise to
to
Mussolini.
Mussolini.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it always comes that way.
Mm-hmm.
You start off as rebels
Right.
and terrorists,
Right.
right? But you end up as dictators,
Mm-hmm. Freedom fighters,
fascists,
right?
right?
Right.
That's what you end up
Right.
as.
You end up modeling the exact same thing that you fought
Yep.
against, right?
hmm
And this happens all the time.
Every time.
Yes.
Every single
Single time.
time. So that's why we say be wary of what we're seeing now from us and
Mm-hmm.
how we're responding to this. We've seen this before,
Right.
and we know where this ends up leading.
Mm-hmm.
Just more of the same, more
Right.
problems. Sometimes exacerbating problems,
Right.
actively making things worse
Mm-hmm.
because you aren't responding
Mm-hmm.
in the correct way,
Right.
or maybe you are, right? Depending on what you want,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want something else, or do you want your turn?
Right. I was just about to say
And
that.
that's
I
what it
was
and
just
that's
about
what
to
it
say that.
always ends up being. You're
Being
saying you want something else.
else.
You're saying you want to do something else. You want to create something else, but all you end up with is having your turn,
Right.
at the very least,
Mm-hmm.
right? And everything ends up exactly the way it was. You end up with more problems, the exact same problems, exacerbating themselves, once again. And then you end up creating the rebels and the terrorists of the future
Right.
who are going to undercut you
Right. And
and,
then
t-
take
and,
your
and then
and they're
take
gonna
your
continue.
place.
Right.
So, hey, let's continue. Ha! And I thought you would tell me something new. We know that one. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Wrong, Dama.
Mm-hmm.
Something more subtle, but far more pervasive. Power attracts the corruptible. You dare accuse me of being corrupt? Watch the eyes. I accuse you. The only one who can do that is yourself. I merely give you the Bene Gesserit opinion. You tell me nothing. Yet we believe there's morality above any law, which must stand watchdog on all attempts at unchanging regulation. You used both words in one sentence and she didn't notice. Power always works, which, that's the law. And governments that perpetuate themselves long enough under that belief always become packed with corruption. Morality.
Mm-hmm.
She's not very good at sarcasm, especially when she's on the defensive. I really tried to help you, Dama. Laws are dangerous to everyone, innocent and guilty alike, no matter whether you believe yourself powerful or helpless. They have no human understanding in and of themselves. There's no such thing as human understanding. Our question is answered, not human. Talk to her unconscious side. She's wide open.
Mm-hmm.
You see? See what's just been said there?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like with the who was the name of that governor that's trying to pass that like if you're out there and you're
Yeah, in
protesting.
Tennessee.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it's in Tennessee.
yeah, if you get arrested
Yeah, I'm gonna take away
and
your voting
protesting,
rights.
take
Yeah,
away
your
your voting
voting.
rights,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make it illegal to defund the police and all
Right.
that stuff. And I remember, you know, reading and watching a video about that, and
Mm-hmm.
reading an article, and at the comments, I think it's always people like, and that's good. Go after,
Right.
they destroying property, they're doing all this, they're
Right.
destroying all that.
Mm-hmm.
Need to stop these people from
Right.
their chaos and
All this rioting and right.
Antifa,
Right.
all that stuff. And it's like, and it's always like, when has I'm just, and it just reminds me of like the good slave, bad slave thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How when a slave would think that
Right.
if they were good, then they wouldn't be beat.
Right.
They wouldn't have to deal with the worst aspects of this. And what do we? There's no such thing
Thing.
as
Right.
a good slave.
Right.
It doesn't matter how you try to conduct yourself.
Right.
The whip is going to fall on you
New
all the
rebel
same,
time. That's right.
right?
Right.
So you who have put yourself on the other side of this argument,
Mm-hmm.
you have put yourself against these people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now you're this governor is trying to pass a law
Mm-hmm.
that constrains the freedoms of these people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That takes away their sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that you're going to be safe from that because what? Because you're a good slave,
Right. Oh,
right?
I'm not protesting.
I'm
I'm not
not protesting.
protesting.
Do you on that? And I said, when has oppression
Right.
ever known where to draw the line?
Correct. Never.
When has that ever happened?
Right.
You think that you're safe because you've put yourself on the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right. And we mentioned this, I don't know how many times. You know, you, you're thinking that you're better off from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not better off.
You said,
Right.
like I said here,
Right.
laws are dangerous to everyone, innocent and guilty alike.
Mm-hmm.
No matter whether you believe yourself powerful or helpless, they have no human understanding in or of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how hard you try, no matter where you put yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to feel the sting of the whip
Right.
at some point.
Right.
And that's how it is.
Right.
That's how it's
Going
supposed to be. That's
Right.
what the society does when it creates these
Mm-hmm.
things. You are resisting the people that you are trying to govern.
Right.
Right? You're trying to constrain them and force them into particular walks of life,
Mm-hmm.
into particular paths that allow you to maintain your power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the people, they do it to themselves.
Correct. I mean, it was the same thing with the ACA versus Obamacare, even though it's the exact same thing, right? And you have folk who were who were against it, for a myriad of reasons. But one of the things that the main thing is that is socialism, and whatever the case may be. And here it is, you have all these folk protesting against it, whatever the case may be, and then when they get sick, all of a sudden the whole concept changes.
You put yourself on the
Right.
other side of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of the argument, thinking that it's going to lead to your benefit.
Right.
But it never
Never does.
It never does.
Right. Here you are still
Oppression
stuck with it.
doesn't know where
That's
to
right.
draw the line. That's
Right.
what laws do.
Mm-hmm.
It's enforced on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
On everyone. No one is immune to this.
Mm-hmm.
So if your government starts to constrain freedoms, to take rights away,
Mm-hmm.
don't think that
They're not coming for you.
that you're not
Right.
going to end up on the other side of this,
Right.
because it's not meant to work for any of us.
Correct.
But so let's continue here.
Right.
I think she elucidates this point more about how laws create that type of mentality.
Right.
How laws engender that.
Mm-hmm.
Laws must always be interpreted. The law bound want no latitude for compassion, no elbow room. The law is the law. It is very defensive. That's a dangerous idea, especially for the innocent. People know this instinctively and resent such laws. Little things are done often unconsciously to hamstring the law and those who deal in that nonsense. How dare you call it nonsense? Half rising from her chair and sinking back. Oh, yes. And the law, personified by all whose livelihoods depend on it, becomes resentful hearing words such as mine. Rightfully so, which, if she doesn't tell you to be silent. More law, you say. We need more law. So you make new instruments of non-compassion and incidentally new niches of employment for those who feed on the system. That's the way it's always been and always will be. Wrong again. It's a rondo. It rose and rose until it injures the wrong person or the wrong group.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get chaos.
Right.
See her jump. That's actually not the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get anarchy.
Right.
Chaos.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Even Frank Herbert used it wrong. See her jump? Rebels, terrorists, increasing outbursts of raging violence, a jihad, and all because you're creating something non-human. Like we said,
Mm-hmm.
these things don't tend to last.
Right.
They come and go in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
They rise and fall by how hard or how stringent they try to control their people.
Mm-hmm.
Stringently, they try to control their people.
Right.
And it always ends up creating the instrument of its own downfall.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But then, like we said, those rebels, those terrorists that are created, end up creating the same thing, and the
Mm-hmm.
cycle continues. You create these laws, like she said, these inhuman things that are meant to be, like we said, created outside of us,
Right.
inexorable axioms
Mm-hmm.
of absolutes.
Right.
And like we said in the last episode, you create these generalizations,
Mm-hmm.
which are impossible to be absolute.
Mm-hmm.
So they're contradictory in terms.
Mm-hmm.
They are going to fail of itself.
Right.
Right. Right. But you create a law that does not have humanity,
Mm-hmm.
or the well-being of its people as its core. It's impossible for a law to be that anyway. So even if you think that that's what you're doing, you're creating,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating the contradiction, you're creating the paradox, you're
Mm-hmm.
creating the downfall.
Right.
Right? And what happens? You create more and more laws.
Mm-hmm.
And soon enough, they are going to stamp down, like you said, on the wrong person,
Mm-hmm.
on the wrong group,
Right.
and you end up creating madness. Like I said, human beings aren't capable of chaos.
Right.
Human beings are beings of order.
Right.
And the only thing that we are capable of is madness,
Mm-hmm.
is trying to hold on and enforce our order on a world that resisted at
Right.
every turn,
Right.
on a people that will always resist it
Mm-hmm.
at every turn. Like you said, they unconsciously resist it. They instinctively know that this is not
Right.
meant for their benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So they unconsciously, in the smallest ways, underpin and undercut particular axioms of our society.
Mm-hmm.
And soon those things gain momentum. And what becomes an uninstinctive, undercutting
Mm-hmm.
becomes a full-on rebellion.
Right.
A terrorist movement.
Mm-hmm.
Madness.
Mm-hmm.
Madness. You see it happening now.
Clear as day.
Clear as day.
Clear as day.
Like I said, this is an old book. This book came out in 1985. 1985. But you
that's his
see,
last book was in 85. Uh-huh.
you see where these things are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it a million miles away.
Wait, right.
Because it has happened before.
Over and over again.
Over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Let me continue here. How did we wander so far away from politics, which, was this your intention? We haven't wandered a fraction of a millimeter. I suppose you're going to tell me you witches practice a form of democracy, with an alertness you cannot imagine. Try me. She thinks you'll tell her a secret. Tell her one. Democracy is susceptible to being led astray by having scapegoats paraded in front of the electorate. Get the rich, the greedy, the criminals, the stupid leader, and so on ad nauseum. You believe as we do. My, how desperately she wants us to be alike.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were bureaucrats who rebelled. You know the flaw. A top-heavy bureaucracy the electorate cannot touch always expands to the system's limits of energy. Steal it from the aged, from the retired, from anyone, especially from those we once called middle class, because that's where most of the energy originates.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, how long have people been saying that the middle class is going extinct? You're stamping on the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this. You're doing that.
As a matter of fact, we say now that there isn't even a middle class. It's just
Mm-hmm.
rich and poor. You don't even have a middle class
Yeah.
anymore. Right.
You think of yourselves as middle class. We don't think of ourselves in any fixed way. But other memory tells us the flaws of bureaucracy. I presume you have some form of civil service for the lower orders. We take care of our own. That's a nasty echo. Then you know how that dilutes the vote. Chief symptom. People don't vote. Instinct tells them it's useless.
Yep.
Like you said,
Right.
you instinctively resist those things that you know aren't on your side.
Right.
Any power that a broken system gives you is only meant to maintain itself.
Makes
so
sense,
it doesn't really
right?
matter how you feed into it, how you use your vote.
Right.
It always ends up creating more problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Democracy is a stupid idea anyway. We agree. It's demagogue prone. That's a disease to which electoral systems are vulnerable. Yet demagogues are easy to identify. They gesture a lot and speak with pulpit rhythms, use words to ring of religious fervor and God fear and sincerity. If that's not true, if you cannot see the look, that's the problem. Like
Right.
we said,
Right.
you know, that's the problem with representative
Democracies.
democracies.
Right.
People like to use the role that they are meant to represent for their own gain,
Mm-hmm.
for their own power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy when you trot out these scapegoats,
Right.
right? When you trot out these people, like you said, get the rich, get the
Mm-hmm.
greedy, get the criminal, or get the homeless, get
Right.
the you know
The single
get
mother,
get
whatever.
the protester,
Right.
get the police,
Right.
get all of this. You
Mm-hmm.
create these groups trying to trick yourself into thinking that they aren't people,
Mm-hmm.
and that what you're creating is not going to fall on you
Right.
at some point, and it always does,
Always.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes it easy for a demagogue to come, to gesture and fill you with the religious fervor of yesteryears. I'm telling you that instead of God, it's me. I'm going to be the one that can lead you. I'm going to be the one who can save you. I'm going to be the one that can fix this. And you put them in place, and things get worse.
Does that?
Things
Yeah,
get
that sounds very
worse.
familiar.
And you keep doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and then you keep having to take the energy away. You keep having to constrain the electorate, like you said, from the aged, the retired, from anyone,
Mm-hmm.
especially from the middle
Right.
class, because those are the people who supposedly have the mobility, right? You create It's demagogue prone
Mm-hmm.
because it's setting people at themselves.
Right.
The bureaucrats try to control the electorate by setting them against each other, which gives rise to demagogues. Again and again.
Right.
Like we said, representative democracies are not democracies.
Correct.
They are meant to keep power pulled up in very particular
Killer. Mm-hmm.
circles, you know. And so instead of working with the electorate, with the people,
Right.
it tries to constrain and control.
Right.
Once again, where was I? All right. Sincerity with nothing behind it takes so much practice, Dama. The practice can always be detected. By truth sayers, see how she leans forward? We have her again. By anyone who learns the signs. Repetition. Great attempts to keep your attention on words. You must pay no attention to words. Watch what the person does. That way you learn the motives. Then you don't have a democracy. Tell me more, Bene Gesserit secrets. But we do. I thought you said. We guard it well, watching for the things I've just described. The dangers are great, but so are the rewards. Do you know what you've told me? That you're a pack of fools. Nice lady, the futon said. Shut up or I'll send you back to the herd. You're not nice, Dama. See what you've done, Witch? You've ruined him. I suppose there are always others. Oh, look at that smile. Lucilla matched the smile precisely, pacing her own breath to those of the great Anarchy. See how alike we are? Of course I tried to injure you. Wouldn't you have done the same in my place? She's losing.
Mm-hmm.
Great honored Matre is losing this
This.
verbose battle.
Right.
And like she said earlier, they have a democracy.
Right.
What you're trying to create is a democracy, but you're trying to create something that is aware of the problems of democracy,
Mm-hmm.
that does its best to curtail that. So it doesn't scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't blame.
Right.
It is always honest. Like
Right.
you say, you enforce your past, you learn the lesson of it.
Mm-hmm.
You recontextualize it as much as you need to,
Right.
to stop these scapegoats.
Right.
You recognize the repetition, right? Those with other memory, or like we say in real life, those with the sense of perspective,
Mm-hmm.
who understands how these things roll in on themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to, like we said, it's not about, trying to stop social hierarchies,
Right.
right? That's indicative of people.
Right.
But it's trying to resist
Just it.
it,
Mm-hmm.
trying your best to to see when it is leading you toward that pitfall,
Mm-hmm.
leading you toward that place, toward the failure, toward the repetition,
Mm-hmm.
that vicious cycle. So you have to constantly be on guard for these things, because it's the only way from a systemic point that allows for the individual to be the individual.
Right.
right? So, you know how to make a democracy do whatever you want, a glowing expression. The technique is quite subtle but easy. You create a system where most people are dissatisfied, vaguely or deeply, right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's
Yeah,
how she
right.
sees it. Look at her nod in time to your words. Lucilla held herself to the rhythm of great Anna Matre's nodding head. This builds up widespread feelings of vindictive anger. Then you supply targets for that anger as you need them. A diversionary tactic. I prefer to think of it as a distraction. Don't give them time to question. Bury your mistakes in more laws. You traffic in illusions. Bullering tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's good. She's almost gleeful. Give her more bullring.
Yeah.
Can't see how she can't see how it was being done to her. Wave the pretty cape, then they'll charge it and be confused when there's no matador behind the thing. That dulls the electorate just as it dulls the bull. Fewer people use their voice intelligently next time. And that's why we do it. We do it. Does she listen to herself? Then you rail against the apathetic electorate. Make them feel guilty. Keep them dull. Feed them. Amuse them. Don't overdo it. Oh no, never overdo it. Let them know hunger awaits them if they don't fall into line. Give them a look at the boredom imposed on boat rockers. Thank you, Mother Superior. It's an appropriate image. Don't you let the bull get an occasional matador? Of course. Thump, got that one. Then you wait for the laughter to subside. I knew you didn't allow a democracy. Why won't you believe me?
Mm-hmm.
You're tempting fate. Because you'd have to permit open voting, jurors and judges, and we call them proctors, a sort of jury of the whole. Now you've confused her. No laws, regulations, whatever you want to call them. Didn't I say we define them separately? Regulation past, law future.
Mm-hmm.
You limit these proctors somehow, right? They can arrive at any decision they desire. The way a jury should function, the law be damned. Like we said, you know, juries in these days
Mm-hmm.
are about maintaining a status quo
Right.
instead of actually adjudicating
Right.
what the case is,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's constraining, resisting the complexity of the situation. Like we
Mm-hmm.
said, you have to take every single case, every single moment
Mm-hmm.
as if it is of itself.
Right.
Judge it for what it is in that moment.
Right.
Judge the person for who they are in that
That
moment.
moment. Right.
Like she said, the law be damned.
Mm-hmm.
That's where justice comes from.
Right.
Because that's the humanity.
Mm-hmm.
But laws resist that.
Right.
It can only be what it is.
Right. Yeah,
You
the
know,
law says this is how it,
mm-hmm,
this is how you have to, find the person, I guess, guilty, non guilty, whatever the case may be, according to this law. Even though that may not fit this particular case,
mm-hmm,
but instead you're going to rely on the law. The law that
yeah,
that has really no bearing on this particular case.
yeah.
Yes, it happens all the time.
It's happened
It's all the time.
a million billion
Right.
times.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue. That's a very disturbing idea. She's disturbed already. Look at how dull her eyes are. The first rule of democracy: no laws restricting juries. Such laws are stupid. It's astonishing how stupid humans can be when acting in small, self-serving groups.
Mm-hmm.
You're calling me stupid, aren't you? Whether orange. There appears to be a rule of nature that says it's almost impossible for self-serving groups to act enlightened. Enlightened. I knew it. That's a dangerous smile. Be careful. It means flowing with the forces of life, adjusting your action that life may continue, with the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number, of course. Quick. We've been too clever. Change the subject. Now she's starting to see what she's been feeding into,
Mm-hmm.
right? And trying to draw a commonality
Right.
with your enemy, right? With great Anamatre,
Mm-hmm.
right? And trying to draw some commonality there.
Right.
You end up showing yourself as a credible threat. You've become a fixture in her world,
Right.
which means it makes it easier for her to take you out.
Yeah, that's to deal
right?
with you. Correct.
But like you've showed your hand a bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
You showed that no one person wields absolute power,
Right.
right? Which means you've become expendable,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's what a democracy is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, democracy does not limit a people.
Right.
You don't these small self-serving groups. Like I said, There's always the jury that lets the police officer go and stuff like that because they think that it's all at stake.
Right.
That their position is at stake in this case.
Right.
So you reinforce the status quo.
Right.
You continue to do these things in like these small self-serving groups.
Right.
You know?
You're not even being tricked.
Yeah. You're giving in.
You're giving in. Correct.
You're being lazy.
Yes,
like
correct.
Said.
Right.
You're being lazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And at the very end of the chapter, Lucilla is killed by the great Anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But hey, all of that, because I'm not going to finish the chapter. It goes because she's killed.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, she's killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's usually how it happens anyway.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
But I think that whole chapter has really helped to illuminate a lot of what we're talking about here. Like we said, the distinction that we make here.
Right.
You know, a democracy, a true democracy, not a representative one that runs off scapegoats and, boring tactics. Right? Like I say, you set the people against themselves. Right? You got people looking at you, people looking at me. Like, you're blaming me. You're blaming me, I'm blaming you.
Right.
We go round and round in a circle. And you get one. You get one maybe.
Right.
You let the bull hit his target every now and then.
Right.
Right? But like you said, it gives just enough. Just enough to maintain what it is. And we've seen that time and time again. And time again.
Right.
So you have to be wary of it. But you have to be wary of it because a democracy is the only way, a true democracy, a true anarchy is the only way that allows for the sovereignty of the individual. So instead of creating laws, you create regulations. You create lessons.
Right.
That allow you, like you said, to recontextualize your past in the way you need to. Allows you to recontextualize your present. Allows you to watchdog yourself and understand, the fallacies of particular of a society that works this way. And as long as you allow for that perspective, allow for that, and you don't try to constrain, you don't try to, you don't try to control. You just allow and you work with. You're not running away anymore.
Right.
You're running towards. You're moving towards. Once you do that, once you have that, everything else falls into place. So instead of trying to create giant, large, sweeping generalizations, instead of trying to create laws, like I said, create regulations, create lessons, work with the people as they are. Allow them to recontextualize themselves and their present and their future and their past. Allow them to learn. Allow them to grow. Never tell a person what they have to be. Like I said, there's no one way to be a person, but there is a way to treat a person. I said respect, self-control, those things. Those are the inexorable. Those are the axiomatic. Everything else is always up for discussion.
Yeah.
It's always going to move, always
That's
going to
work.
change. And you're going to have to allow for that. You're going to have to let that be the case because if you don't, you end the repetition.
Right.
You're back in it again.
Right.
Back in it again, creating more and more problems, allowing for a broken system to create more problems.
Right.
You're feeding into it. You're feeding into it and you think you're on the other side of it. Right? You think you're on the other side and you think that you're going to find some way to benefit. Right? That the system as it is going to benefit me now, or I'm going to change the system so it can benefit me later.
Right.
But that never comes. You never benefit.
Right.
It's not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Right.
It always
There's no gimmick
to
here.
Disenfranchise.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem, that we're always looking to maneuver. We're looking to, create this, I don't know, this, learn this new trick to get. No, it's just simply about doing the work that needs to be done.
Like we said, there's no grand gestures,
no
secret knowledge here.
Right. Just do the work.
Yeah.
And I remember it's a poem. I cannot think of the title. And it's by, I am going to screw up the last name now, but I know his first name is Hakeem. And you all know who I'm talking about. His last name starts with an M. The last name is slipping my mind. But in any case, he has a poem, and he in the poem he's mentioned something to the effect of, you know, do the work that regular people need to do. We're always thinking that it's going to be some grand, grand plan, something out the sky, or it's something so big and grandiose that you don't think. Just do the thing that you have do regular stuff, bro. Just do the thing that regular people have to do. That's what you do. We know that if we keep doing this, we are going to continue to get the same thing. And we keep saying this is not what we want, but yet we keep doing the same thing, thinking that, maybe we put different people in places. We got to go vote again and all of
Mm-hmm.
this upset. And here we are. We've been voting.
Mm-hmm.
We show up and we show out every rip.
We had our guy,
That's
for
right.
8 years.
I'm just saying, even before and after that, when we, and here we are.
It's going to take something
else.
else. And it's going, that's what I'm saying. That's what anarchy is.
Mhm.
So, in conclusion, right? In conclusion, anarchy is true democracy.
Mhm.
Anarchy is about maintaining the sovereignty of the individual at all costs,
Mhm.
resisting social hierarchies, fighting against that particular type of sentiment,
Mhm.
and understanding that it's the small things that matter most. That is not about trying to create one complete unilateral system that everyone has to live under, right?
Mhm.
It's not about that.
Mhm.
Because when you do that, you end up creating more problems.
Mhm.
You end up creating, this vicious cycle, this repetition of history that we've seen time and time again.
Mhm.
It's going to take, like we said, this neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community,
Mhm.
dealing with the people where they are, as they are, and allowing them to change, promoting that change,
Mhm.
not trying to constrain them down, not trying to tell them how they have to be.
Mhm.
You know,
But what happens if, I don't like what you are becoming?
in what way?
No, I'm just saying, you know, if you do not like what someone is, or what's or who someone becomes, right?
Mhm.
Then that's a problem for you.
Mhm.
That's not the problem for the other person. You know, we have, sons and daughters who don't become, I guess what you've
What we want
always
them to
played.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Right. And so that's not their problem.
Mhm.
That's
It's not a problem.
yeah. I'm just saying.
Mhm.
If you are looking at it as a problem,
Mhm.
then that's your problem and your problem alone. So we have to get out of
Like I said,
the imposing.
like I said, it's
Right.
about not about telling people how they have to be,
Right.
but about just treating everyone with the respect.
Hmm.
Like I said, those are the things that are non-negotiable,
Right.
right? Like I said, you always have to temper your knowledge and actions,
Hmm.
your knowledge and action of self with the understanding
Understanding
that you are living in a society with other people,
people. Right.
right? That we all have to live in the consequences of each other's decisions.
Hmm.
So if as long as we are doing this,
Hmm.
we're all going to have to live in the consequence of it.
Hmm.
And it's always going to be this. It takes this form. It looks, it's this. It's
Yes.
this. It is always going. It's the same problems, the same conversations, the
Hmm.
same thing is not going to solve anything.
Hmm.
It's not going to solve anything.
Hmm.
So you need to wind down,
Mm-hmm.
community by community, community by community. Regulations,
Mm-hmm.
not laws.
Mm-hmm.
Allow for movement, allow for change. Promote it. It's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
You need it, right? But it's not about control. It's not about trying to profit. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about trying to win. It's not about any of those
Right.
things. It's
It's just
about
about doing. Just
it's
doing.
about
Right.
understanding that
Right.
as long as you're trying to profit, as long as you're trying to win, that's all you're ever going to do is try
And
to profit and try
try
to
to
win.
win because
You're going to keep
yes.
falling into the same pitfalls, into the same problems, to the same things over and over again.
Right.
It's never going to change, and
Right.
it's
And
always
if
going to
you
leave
think
you wanting.
right, if you think that a particular people, that they've won,
Hmm.
right? Then why are we here
Because you're
with
trying to win.
this? Because you're still trying, and
Hmm.
that's all. And if
Well, I guess it's your turn to win. They won. Now it's my turn to win. Like I said, it's the
yeah,
bulldog
yeah,
tactics. It's
yeah,
always another person,
right,
and you keep charging for that red cape, and there's nothing behind it.
right.
There's nothing behind it. You know.
You win this by not playing.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is this continuation of what we're doing. We have to stop doing
There's
this.
look for me. There's no such thing as winning.
That's what I'm
Not in
saying.
this.
Right. There is no win.
So
That's what I'm saying.
so
So
just get it out of your heads
right,
altogether.
right. So you got
There's no
so you
there's
have to do something
no
else.
winning. There's no
Right.
controlling. There's no the first Dune. Like I said, life isn't a mystery to solve, but a reality to
Experience.
experience.
Right.
There is no end here,
Mm-hmm.
no goal, no objective, no point where it's over.
Right.
It's all about living together. Really,
Mm-hmm.
that's all what this is. Learning about living together and respecting each other.
Right.
But you have a society that does not promote that, does
Right.
not run on that
Mm-hmm.
runs off of these illusions, these
Mm-hmm.
delusions that we've
Right.
created for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, you know, and they always leave, like I said, it leaves you wanting. It leaves that space, that gap. It allows for corruption to fester. It attracts the very worst aspects of our society,
Hmm.
you know, and it just keeps rolling in on itself again and again, rising and falling.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all stuck in this cycle because, let's say, we live our life like it's a lottery.
Mm-hmm.
We all want our
Turn.
chance to
Right.
win big, our turn, our opportunity. We think if we just keep going, we keep going, we keep going, we're going to get our chance. And you're going to get exactly what you're looking for. You're going to get your chance,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's going to end the exact
That
same
same
way
way. Right.
as everything else.
Right.
If you want to create something prosperous,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to create something that can last, then it's going to take something else. You won't
Right.
be able to benefit the way that you used to benefiting,
Right.
right? Like I said, you won't win.
Right.
You know, you won't be able to get your victory. You won't be able to get your recompense and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Your revenge, your justice. All of these things are going to have to change.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are going to have to change, and they're changing already. You just don't notice it, or you're resisting it. You're ignoring
Yes. Yes.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're dealing with people,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're dealing with people, no one thing is ever going to be that thing forever. Like I said, absolutes only exist on an individual case by case basis. If you want an absolute, then you can't generalize.
Right.
You can't create laws. You
Mm-hmm.
can't create these giant sweeping things. It can't be this anymore.
Right.
This representative democracy, which is
Right.
not a democracy,
Mm-hmm.
and it can't be what it was
Right.
before either. It can't be kings and peasants and
Right.
nobility and all that foolishness
Right.
either, because it was just this.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take people leveling the playing field for all of us,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that it's not about, listen, not about getting ahead, not about getting more, trying
Right.
to get more than someone else. It's not about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's about everyone being able to do the thing that they want to do,
Right.
and tempering that want
Right.
with the knowledge of society and
Right.
community,
You wouldn't
brotherhood.
even think that something like everyone having access to clean water would be, this revolutionary, big thing. That everyone, having a place to live, having food. You wouldn't think that would lead to.
It'd be so hard,
Yeah,
you know.
right.
But that's the thing. That you're not trying to provide. You're trying to profit.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
You're trying to win. You're trying to reach that end goal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all you ever end up doing. You're trying to revolt. You're trying to change. You're trying to rebel. And that's all you end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's try, tripping and falling again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want something else, you have to create something else. You want the answer is this. Is this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
It's going to take a lot of maturity
yeah.
on the people
Yeah. So
to do
like I
something
said,
like
like
this.
there's no one answer. That's
Right.
the answer. You know where you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know what community you're staying in. Look at the problems, rectify the problems for
Right.
where you are and for you and yours and where you are.
Right.
That's going to change for people by people, place by place.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're working from a basis of, like I said, of self-respect, of self-control,
Mm-hmm.
of the common good, right? As long as you're working from that basis, that, like I said, that is allowing for a person to be who they want to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? As long as you have that, as long as you're working from that,
Mm-hmm.
everything else is going to fall into place. You're not trying to dictate. You're not trying to control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you know, it's going to take a lot of trust. You're going to have to trust your people. You're going to have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it's going to take that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's a lot of people who just don't trust us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust anything, and
How do
that's
you
by
how do you grow with people like that around you anyway? So
and that's by design.
right,
But
right,
you're not meant to grow. Right?
correct.
That's by design
Mm-hmm.
for you to not trust. For you to just always think that they're going to try to get ahead of you, so you need to try to get ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're always going to try to backstab you. They're
Right.
always going to try to break you, hurt you, and
Right.
stuff
It's
like
going to
that.
always be something.
It's always going
Right.
to be something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, somebody has to be the adult here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to be the adult, and that someone is each and every one of us.
Right.
It is incumbent upon all of us,
Mm-hmm.
to take the necessary steps and to do the necessary work.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, if you're asking what is the answer, what are you talking about? What is it? It is this.
Right.
It is regulations, not laws.
Mm-hmm.
It is communities,
Right.
not governments.
Right. It's a shift in perspective.
It's like it is. It's people
Mm-hmm.
and prioritizing people, not trying to represent them, not trying to control them,
Mm-hmm.
not trying to, corral them.
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying to galvanize here. You're not trying. No more leaders. None of that.
Right.
That always falls into the same pitfalls.
Mm-hmm.
It's about each and every one of us.
Right.
Taking those necessary steps for each and every one of us. So yes. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever.
Right. Just hit us up.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of background noise in this one.
Maybe, I'm not sure. We'll
see.
We'll see.
But like you said, we live in an apartment building. There's a lot of noise everywhere. It's a very, busy community.
Right.
So yeah.
Hear us out.
Hear us out. Thank you for listening. Yeah.